Trump's comments about potentially increasing tariffs on India. So how do you see these geopolitical tensions? Is that going to be a factor when it comes to India's growth
Decades
prospects?
of outperformance of those fund managers or those stalwarts have come because they've stick to their discipline.
Do you have any advice to a retail investor? So when it comes to their
Have
portfolio,
an advisor in place and try to have a proper allocation as far as where you're investing, but definitely have a meaningful allocation to equity, especially
what
being
do you
in
think
India.
are the red flags when it comes to a particular stock? When do you decide that this is where I have to take a call
The
and
start
move
of
on?
the career where we all have done enough mistakes to learn from, uh, chasing the momentum, chasing the
Any
rhetorics.
sectors that you feel like are undervalued or maybe about to discover? So how do you differentiate between this temporary hype, when compared to a long-term sustainable trend? We have a special guest, Meeta Shetty, fund manager of Tata AMC. Meeta manages an impressive portfolio of funds, including Tata Focused Equity Fund, Tata India Pharma and Healthcare Fund, and the Tata Digital India Fund, with a combined AUM of over 3 billion. With more than 13 years of experience in the industry, she brings a wealth of knowledge, particularly in the IT, pharma, and telecom sectors. In today's episode, we'll explore her journey as a fund manager and how she manages fast evolving industries like digital and healthcare, and get a sneak peek into the upcoming Tata Innovation Fund. Yeah, so let me get on to my questions.
Sure.
So first, I would like to start from the very beginning. Uh, so how did you end up in the fund management space? And with over a decade of experience in the industry, so how has your investment philosophy evolved over the period of time?
Sure. So I started off as any college pass outs would, that not very clear as to what I actually wanted to do. But I landed up in a job where I was closer to equity markets, more like an advisory role for the first 1.5 years, and that's when I realized that this is an industry that I want to actually grow into, a bigger and bigger role. And I realized that if I want to get into more detail and start making difference to the investor's life, I have to eventually move into research. And that's when eventually that journey started. So I then started as a research analyst, and last in the last 14 years, from an analyst to fund manager since 2018 now. So that's how it eventually ended up into the role that I am. Initially I was not sure that this is what I would end up into, but yeah, this is how it's evolved.
Yeah, and how has your investment philosophy evolved over a period of time? Maybe in the initial stages, you might have a certain set of rules, certain set of guides. Over a period of time, it must have evolved because you've seen a couple of cycles.
Yes, yes. So I think in the first years, obviously there is a learning curve. Uh, like all the other stalwarts, I would say my journey is still very nascent. But all of us have gone through a very similar journey, at least at the start of the career, where we all have done enough mistakes to learn from, uh, chasing the momentum, chasing the rhetorics, to then eventually, creating a base and a thought process as to how one should approach, research, do more deep, in-depth analysis, and then have a disciplined approach. I think that is what is very critical, because whatever the strategy or the philosophy might be, it will be different from fund manager to fund manager, but sticking to that is what actually sets some of the real decades of outperformance of those fund managers or those stalwarts have come because they've stick to their discipline, which is, I think, very very critical. And that discipline part is the most trickier part, that you have to get yourself into that zone, that you're sticking to what you believe, and not digressing too much because of the noise you have around you. I think that's the evolution that I have seen personally in my journey. And when I read or look around and hear the other senior fund managers, I think this is something that most of us have gone through. So I think that is one thing critical. And as far as the philosophy or investment strategy is concerned, I think that gets fine tuned even today. 2 years back, what I was thinking versus what I'm thinking today in terms of absolute strategy, that gets fine tuned. And I think it's an ever learning experience, and it's ever evolving. So I think that is always there. That learning curve will always be there. But as far as the philosophy is concerned, I think that's more clearer, and sticking to the discipline part is far, far difficult phase where I think now I have kind of come to terms with that.
Okay, got it. Makes sense. Makes sense. So I'm curious about how you balance short-term market movements with long-term value creation. For instance, given the recent market run-up, how are you adjusting your strategy? Also, if you look at very recently, Sensex has dropped 5,000 points. So how has these sort of, I could call it market volatility. So how do you deal with these sort of market volatility?
So I think the discipline part comes back to
Yeah.
the fore here. There will always be noises around you, and these short-term volatility will always be the biggest part of this noise. And how do I disassociate myself from that and try to just do what I actually believe in terms of my philosophy of finding stocks where I am protected on the downside, which is the margin of safety, which I borrow from, you know, Mr. Warren Buffett, and at the same time implementing something what a Peter Lynch would say in terms of invest what you know see around you. It's like a blend of that, and then on a with that there comes a layer of garb which we as a philosophy stand out for at Tata AMC. So I think it's a mix of these which I stick to, and whatever these volatility movements happen, I try to see if that's opening up an opportunity for me to pick up you know a company or a franchisee which for some reason is trading at it's lower than its intrinsic value, which is what I think this volatility at the most get me to. I don't get too bothered by that, because see anyways I'm investing my investors money for a 3 year or a 5 year period at least. So this near term volatility, I think I try to cut off myself as much as I can.
Okay, got it, got it. So the market seems to be pricing a lot of optimism lately. Uh, so how do you differentiate between this temporary hype, and compared to, say, how do you differentiate between a long-term sustainable trend?
Yeah. So I think what really you know clears out apples to apples and orange to oranges is that what is the visibility of growth. If the hype is there but the comfort on visibility of growth is limited, then I think I'd be happy to leave that return on the table. I would not want to play that for a short period of time. But yes, if the hype is backed by some long runway of growth, and not only growth but also a good cash flow, good ROE curve, then I would definitely want to look at it in detail. And if I get more and more convinced, then I would want to take that bet. So a lot more homework will have to be done to understand the nuances a little more. And only when I have these comfort on growth and on profitability, cash flows, etc., is when I would want to take those bets.
Okay. So are there any sectors that you feel like are undervalued or maybe about to discover?
So not about to discover, I would say, but yes, private banks today are trading at a far lower, or
Okay.
not lower, but I would say attractive valuations versus where the overall markets have been in the last 2 years. So I think private banks is certainly one area which looks pretty attractive versus overall markets right now.
Got it, got it. So you just talked about the green flags about entering a stock. So similarly, what do you think are the red flags when it comes to a particular stock? When do you decide that this is where I have to take a call and move on?
Sure. So I think you know, looking at just the revenue growth and the especially the profit number does distort the real picture at times. We have to look at what the cash flows are looking like, what is the ROE curve emerging as, because sometimes for a short period of time companies might show a better earnings profile, but when you look deeper into the balance sheet and into the cash flows, then you see that the picture is very different. So that sometimes becomes a red flag to me, and I try and avoid that. You know, if I've taken those bets, I would try and get out of that if I realize that you know this is how it's emerging. So yeah, that's something that I would not say red flags as such, but these are the areas where I would not want to invest in, because eventually then even if the multiples have kind of you know gone up for some good growth that the earnings is showing, it won't sustain if it's not backed by a better and a stronger balance sheet and a stronger cash flow.
Got it, got it. So again, I would like to talk about the broader context. So how do you see India's economic uh, trajectory compared to other emerging markets? How do you
Right.
compare?
So, look, I think India's story today, a lot of us read a lot, and I'm sure all of us believe that we are in a very good spot. Certainly, because our GDP growth is looking better, we were in the top 10, we were somewhere around 8 or 9 about a decade back. Now we are barging into top 3. So that way India's story has been showing time and again that we are resilient, and we are recovering from the shocks like COVID also far stronger versus the other economies. Our fiscal discipline is far tighter versus the other economies despite the shocks that we have seen in COVID. So all of that is certainly very, very reassuring as to what India is and India's story is. And I think we have an added benefit today as far as our country is concerned versus the other emerging is that apart of the macros that we have and the Goldilocks, as we call that, inflation is in control and the growth is good, we have this added benefit of the manufacturing angle. Look, in the 1980s, 90s, we saw that a lot of movement happened in terms of where the manufacturing hubs were created. And our neighboring economies really did a great job and fantastic job as far as the execution was concerned. Today, as a silver lining for COVID, there is a lot of talk of some manufacturing base moving out of some heavily cornered economies and moving to country like India. And we have seen some of that play out in the last 2 years. But I think the runway of growth is humongous, and if that is executed very well, then I think it adds a layer of comfort and visibility to the India growth story. So I think we are in a very, very sweet spot. Yes, there will be challenges and there will be hiccups, but I think if we are able to execute it well, the next decade can be very, very strong, and will emerge much stronger than one could anticipate.
So, do you expect any interest rate cuts in India?
Interest rate cuts, I am not very sure. I'm not that expert on that, but I think that we would generally try and align ourselves with the global economy. So maybe sooner or later we might see that.
Okay. So recently, talking back about the global factors, so recently we've heard statements from US presidential candidates, including Trump's comments about potentially increasing tariffs on India. So how do you see these geopolitical tensions? Is that
Yeah.
going to be a factor when it comes to India's growth prospects?
Yes, we will have to keep that in the backdrop when we are, making decisions, certainly, because it can impact the growth. As I said, this manufacturing angle is playing out very, very well.
Yeah,
We have
correct.
seen some electronics and phones getting manufactured in India at a very large scale that
Yeah.
nobody thought 5 years back that this is the scale that we would be manufacturing. So there is a, intent, and there is a clear, what do you say, a capability that India is showing in terms of we are able to execute that at a large scale, at least in these few electronics, etc., that I'm talking about. We are seeing a lot of semiconductor led work also starting to happen. So I think that it will not get totally derailed, but yes, there can be some impact in certain categories if these tariffs, etc., were to be levied. So we have to be very cognizant of that.
Got it, got it. So I believe there's a Tata Innovation Fund that's coming down the line. So uh, what do you think investors should enter into Tata Innovation Fund at the current market levels?
Sure. So first, look, whenever we come out with this proposition in the new fund or the existing funds that we have, we would want investors to have a longer runway of investment horizon.
Makes
So
sense.
at least
Yeah.
3 to 5 years to start with. The longer it is, the better. From that lens, even at today's market, this or any other existing fund, as I said, makes a lot of sense since whatever we discussed in terms of India story, etc. So that is one. Second is why innovation as a theme. So, when you look around today in terms of the services or the products that we have started using versus what we were doing a decade back is far more seamless, far more efficient, far more smoother, better experience, comfort. All of that is getting stitched around. Like, for example, a banking transaction, we were queuing up to the branches to then hopping to the ATMs, and now doing the comforts of our house with a small trick. So that's nothing but an innovation which has happened in that sector in terms of the services which are rendered to us. Similarly, a car driving experience today versus a car that you and I were driving 10 years back. Today, there's so much tech in the system overall. So that also means that a better service, a better product is at your hand. Everything as basic as your hard soap moving to a liquid soap is just a better experience to the end customer. Even your thermal moving to solar is better for the environment, better for newer products coming in that bucket. So I think that when we look around, practically every sector is going through some kind of innovation, either at a product level, either at a service level, or at on the business model side. And we're trying to capture that, and we think that as we step into the next decade, these innovations will become more and more pronounced, and in turn they will end up giving us a lot of opportunity as fund managers, as analysts, to choose and pick those ideas and see how we can generate alpha for our investors. So hence innovation becomes a good idea, especially in this ever changing world. So that's the broader thought. Now the question might be that how will we be different, because I named quite a few sectors
Yes,
like
yes,
banks,
correct.
FMCGs, etc. Then how is this different from a diversified category fund? So in that we will try and we will be excluding sectors where we think that either there is a very limited scope to innovate, second there is no intent to innovate, and third there is probably the sector or the product or the service which is in use will become redundant 20 or 30 years down the line, or maybe a decade later. So we'll try and exclude these areas which will differentiate us also in process, how we'll be different from any other diversified category.
Correct. So when it comes to this innovation fund, what do you think is a fund deployment strategy? Because markets are every day we are reaching new all-time highs.
Yeah.
So what do you think is strategy? What is your strategy? Do you have any strategies in mind currently?
So as per the mandate, we have to deploy in the 30 months, 30 days, 30 days of
Okay.
the NFO closure date. But within that 30 days, I will be deploying as per mandate.
Okay.
I might take some benefit of the futures or something if it's a liquid stock, but that's
Okay.
more on that. But largely the deployment should be done in the
First
first
30
20,
days.
30 days of the launch. But as far as strategy of deployment is concerned, look, even if I look at my existing funds, there's a very clear way, the way I think in terms of how do I want to structure the portfolio is that I try to identify stocks where there is for some reason the stock are not valued as they should be in terms of their P ratios or an EV EBITDA. And the reason is that something is going wrong, possibly at the industry level or company level, strategy level, competition is increased or whatever. But they are nearing their inflection point where I believe that things can really turn around from here. And if I'm able to identify those names and choose them for my fund, and if they are those kind of opportunities are ample enough to make at least 50% of my fund in terms of the allocation, then I think that I have a very good 3 to 5 year kind of runway as to how the fund should do. The balance half generally is into more like stable existing companies, large companies which probably have gone through multiple cycles and have come out stronger and stronger. How I define them is compounder bucket and alpha bucket.
Okay.
So alpha bucket is, as I explained, you can call them contrarian, you can call them special opportunities. I call them alpha, and compounder, as I explained, are most stable ones. And what this ends up doing is that the alpha bucket does the heavy weight lifting as far as the alpha generation is concerned for the overall fund, and the compounder bucket gives me a lot of stability if markets were to turn volatile in the near term. And similar approach will be applied on for this fund as well.
Okay, got it. So one more question that I would like to add to that is, this must be a difficult question for you since you manage a lot of sectoral funds out there. If you were to pick out the top three sectors, which ones would you pick? Say then for the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay. So I think private banks, as I already mentioned, we think that valuations definitely are attractive, and that
Okay.
makes a lot of sense. From today to maybe next 3 years, 5 years time frame. IT time and again has proved to be very very resilient, and although the valuations right now are running on the higher side, as far as the historical valuations are concerned for the sector. So very near term might be we will see that valuations might limit the kind of or we might see in terms of growth, etc. But from a 3 to 5 year, again, I think, as I said, it's a very resilient sector, and
Yes.
it continues to surprise in terms of whenever there's a new technology curve. Like this time we have Gen AI, we've had cloud and digital and Y2K, all the way from there. Indian IT has emerged very very strong. So I think that becomes a very structural play. So that obviously will be in one of those top three. And then would be power sector, where I think that there's so much work which is still to happen in terms of we at a country level adding capacities. We have roughly about 550 gigawatts of capacity installed today in India, and we have a mandate to go to about 930 odd number in the
Okay.
next 5 7 years. So there's so much expenditure which will happen on this sector, and in turn it'll drive a lot of profitability and revenue growth for multiple companies in the ecosystem. So those three will be the sectors.
Got it. Got it. Great. So looking ahead, so for the next 5 to 10 years, what structural changes do you anticipate in the Indian market? Particularly, I would like to know more about the emerging trends like AI. So how are you factoring that in your funds, and how do you think Indian investors can take advantage of this particular Gen AI, like you just mentioned?
Right. So I think there are no clear cut names that you can create a portfolio with of GenAI because it's still very emerging and nascent in
Yeah.
its stage. But IT services companies will start taking a larger share of the overall pie once we have a far more adaption of GenAI. Right now, they are more of proof of concept kind of
Okay.
testings which are happening and trying to make the platform more mature enough to be implemented in the back end. But right now, you won't find any names. I think as time goes, Indian IT services become a good proxy to actually play that. And then there will be some very small companies here and there, smaller size, which can be really a Gen AI play. But I think the large part of that will be captured in the IT services.
Got it. Got it. So you've been working in the industry for more than a decade, and you must have seen a lot of cycles. So how do you adapt your investment strategy to different market cycles? Do you see any parallels to the current market cycle that to the previous market cycles?
So, so yes, I think there are times when markets become the talk of the town, which is what we are in today, and
Yeah.
practically everybody on the road you bump into is probably talking markets. So we have come across these kind of situations in the past as well. Uh, so yes, there are some relations in that extent, but at the same time, today. When we look at the overall numbers growth in terms of where the corporate balance sheets are and the visibility in terms of how the profit curve, margins, etc., growth, etc., will all emerge, it's not too worrying.
Okay.
There have been times when valuations have gone up like it has today, but there was no strong backing in terms of balance sheets and corporate growth, etc., which is there today. So
Okay.
hence, this time is different, I would say, and that's why we are not so bogged up on valuations so much. We think yes, we are trading higher, and we might time correct a bit to levelize on the valuation number, but we're not so worried because of the balance sheets of Indian, not only at a country level but even corporate level as we see.
Okay. Got it. So investors are always on the lookout for the next best thing. So beyond the well-known sectors, are there any under the radar opportunities that you're excited about? Also, can you walk us through the process through identifying that you use to identify these sectors before it becomes mainstream?
So generally, I am a more bottom-up kind of person.
Okay.
I look at stock or companies rather than taking those sectoral bets.
Okay.
That's not my style.
Okay.
So I don't look at what sectors will be emerging. Rather, I would say that what stocks will be emerging. Now, it may happen that I find multiple of those bottom-up stock ideas in a particular sector. Like right now, I said private banks, power. I might end up finding more bottom-up ideas into those sectors, but I'm not a sector person. So I'm more stock bottom up kind of fund manager. So not the right question for me rather,
Okay.
but yeah, that's how
Yeah.
I think.
Excellent. So this is one of the most common questions that I ask to all my fund managers that I meet with. So how does your personal portfolio allocation look like? So if you could give me a percentage wise, that'd be great.
Okay, percentage wise, let me see. So I think at least 70% would be equity,
Okay.
and the rest would be real estate, which is what I own for a long time now.
So do you have any advice to a retail investor? So when it comes to their portfolio, and any 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 general advice to the retail
Yeah.
investors?
No, so I think one advice which I will, and I keep giving this to wherever I go, is that wherever we are in terms of today, in terms of our country, our per capita and the, aim to reach 2,500, taking to $5,000. The manufacturing bandwidth that I'm talking about, that India probably might, if you execute well, we might be at a very different scale, a decade later. All of that means that there is an ample opportunity for us as investors to take part of in this India growth story, and the very near term might look volatile and might kind of you know uh, uh, get you to think that whether it's all done and markets have rallied and all, but I think keep a long term horizon and whatever you're seeing around you in terms of India's story and whatever you're reading, if that momentum is there and that visibility is getting added every month, every year, every few years, I think that there's a lot of opportunity that we can gain for ourselves as at our private wealth level if we are invested into equities. Obviously, have a proper capital allocation strategy. You have to have a larger allocation to diversified categories rather than sectoral bets, because sectors will have its cycle. So have an advisor in place and try to have a proper allocation as far as where you're investing, but definitely have a meaningful allocation to equity, especially being in India in this scenario where we are. I think that we will, all of us, including me, we will have to have a good share of equity investments and have at least a 5+ years of investment horizon.
So thank you so much for your time. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you
Thanks,
so much.
pleasure.